The courtroom felt colder than it should have been that Tuesday morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was just the weight of everything that was about to happen. Tyler sat at the defense table, his fingers drumming nervously against the wooden surface. He tried to stop, but his hands wouldn't listen. They just kept moving, tapping out an anxious rhythm that only he could hear. Behind him, he could feel eyes burning into the back of his head. The gallery was packed. People from his neighborhood, kids from school, teachers who used to smile at him in the hallways. Now they all stared like he was someone they'd never really known, someone dangerous, someone who could destroy property worth $50,000 and not feel anything about it. His mom sat in the first row behind the defense table. Tyler didn't need to turn around to know she was crying again. She'd been crying for 3 weeks straight, ever since the police showed up at their door with a warrant. Her cleaning business had been struggling, and now this. She'd sold her car to pay for the lawyer sitting next to Tyler, but even he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, was shuffling through papers for the third time. His briefcase was old and worn at the edges, held together with duct tape on one corner. Tyler had noticed that detail the first day they met. It told him everything he needed to know about his chances. Across the aisle, Mr. Chen sat with his arms folded across his chest. The man owned the classic car dealership that someone had vandalized on Valentine's Day. His face was hard, angry, the kind of angry that doesn't go away. Next to him sat his lawyer, a woman in an expensive suit who looked like she'd never lost a case in her life. Her briefcase probably cost more than Tyler's mom made in a month. The judge walked in and everyone stood. Judge Morrison was in his 60s with gray hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain around his neck. He looked tired, like he'd seen too many cases just like this one. Probably had. Tyler sat back down when everyone else did, his heart hammering so hard he thought people might hear it. The prosecutor stood up first. Her name was Ms. Rodriguez, and she had this way of speaking that made everything sound like an absolute fact. No room for doubt. No space for maybe. She started laying it all out. February 14th, around 11 at night, someone broke into Chen's classic auto gallery. They smashed display windows, spray-painted horrible words across the showroom walls, and destroyed vintage car parts worth thousands of dollars. The security system caught it all on camera. Well, sort of. The footage was grainy, dark, but you could see someone about Tyler's height and build, someone wearing what looked like a red and black Letterman jacket, Tyler's school colors. His stomach twisted. Then came the evidence. Ms. Rodriguez held up photos of the damage. The broken glass scattered across the floor like diamonds. The spray paint, ugly black letters spelling out threats. She showed the judge a plastic evidence bag containing a brick. Tyler's fingerprints were on that brick, found right there at the scene. The murmuring started in the gallery, whispers passing from row to row like a wave. Tyler felt his face getting hot. Ms. Rodriguez wasn't done. She brought up Tyler's school record. Okay. So he'd been late to class a bunch of times. He'd talked back to Coach Stevens after being benched during a game. Got suspended for 3 days last semester for arguing with the vice principal about a dress code violation he thought was stupid. None of that made him a criminal. But the way she told it, he sounded like he was heading toward trouble his whole life. Then came the witness. A guy named David Torres took the stand. Tyler had never seen him before in his life. Torres was in his 30s, wearing a polo shirt and khakis like he'd just come from a normal day at work. He looked nervous but determined. Torres said he'd been driving past the dealership that night. Saw someone running away from the building right after he heard glass breaking. The person was wearing a red and black jacket just like the one from Tyler's school. He'd called the police right away, gave them a description. When they showed him Tyler's photo from the yearbook, Torres nodded immediately. That's the kid, he'd said. Tyler wanted to stand up and scream that it wasn't true, that he'd never even owned a Letterman jacket. But Mr. Patterson put a hand on his arm. Stay calm, the gesture said. Your turn will come, but would it matter? Tyler looked around the courtroom. Everyone believed he'd done it. He could see it in their faces, the way they looked at him, like he was already guilty, like this trial was just a formality. The prosecutor talked about Tyler's alibi or lack of one. Where were you that night, Tyler? At home, he'd told the police. Alone in your room? Yes, can anyone confirm that? His mom had been working a late shift cleaning office buildings downtown. She hadn't gotten home until 1 in the morning, so no one could confirm it. Ms. Rodriguez painted the picture clearly. A troubled teen with a history of discipline problems. No alibi for the night in question. His fingerprints at the scene. A witness who saw someone matching his description running away. It all added up perfectly. Too perfectly. The prosecution rested their case and Judge Morrison called for a lunch recess. Tyler stood up on shaky legs. His mom pushed through the crowd to hug him, and he could feel her trembling. She whispered that everything would be okay, but her voice cracked on the words. They both knew she was lying to make him feel better. Mr. Patterson pulled Tyler aside in a small conference room. They had sandwiches from the courthouse cafeteria, but Tyler couldn't eat. His lawyer was going over what would happen next. They'd present Tyler's side after lunch. Character witnesses. Maybe some questions about the reliability of the video footage. But Patterson's voice lacked confidence. He knew what Tyler knew. This wasn't looking good. Tyler excused himself to use the bathroom. Standing at the sink afterward, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. 17 years old. Brown eyes that looked older than they should. Hair his mom had made him cut neat for court. He looked like a kid. A scared kid who was about to have his whole future decided by people who'd already made up their minds. He dried his hands and walked back toward the courtroom. People moved away from him in the hallway, like whatever he had might be contagious. Mrs. Patterson from down the street, who used to give him cookies when he mowed her lawn, turned away when he tried to make eye contact. Back in the courtroom, Tyler pulled out his backpack from under the defense table. Inside was his notebook, the blue one with the bent cover that he'd been carrying everywhere for the past 3 weeks. Mr. Patterson had told him he wouldn't need it, that they had a strategy, but Tyler had brought it anyway. He flipped it open and looked at the pages, notes, photos, receipts, timestamps, everything he'd been working on since the moment he realized he was being set up. Mr. Patterson didn't know about most of it. Tyler had been doing this on his own, staying up until 3 in the morning, following leads that probably wouldn't go anywhere. But maybe they would. Maybe they had to. The judge came back in and everyone stood again. This time when Tyler sat down, something felt different. He wasn't just a scared kid anymore. He had information. He had proof. He had truth on his side, even if nobody else knew it yet. Mr. Patterson stood to begin the defense, but before he could speak, Tyler did something he hadn't planned. Something that would change everything. He raised his hand. The judge looked surprised. So did everyone else. Mr. Patterson actually dropped his pen and it clattered onto the table with a sound that echoed through the silent courtroom. Tyler's hand was still raised, steady now, even though his heart was racing faster than ever. Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly, peering over his glasses. "Yes, young man?" Tyler stood up slowly. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak." "If that's allowed." The prosecutor shot to her feet immediately. "Objection. This is highly irregular. The defendant hasn't been prepared for testimony and—" "I'm not testifying exactly," Tyler interrupted, then caught himself. "Sorry, I just want to explain some things. Show some evidence. I've been working on something." Mr. Patterson grabbed Tyler's sleeve and pulled him down into a whispered conversation. "What are you doing?" "We didn't discuss this." "You can't just—" "I know," Tyler whispered back. "But trust me, please, I found things. Real things. Things that prove I didn't do this." His lawyer looked torn, scared even. But then he glanced at Tyler's notebook, at the determination in his client's eyes, and something shifted. He nodded slowly and stood up. "Your Honor, my client has prepared some information he'd like to present to the court. I request permission for him to address you directly." Ms. Rodriguez was shaking her head vigorously. "This is completely unorthodox. The defense cannot simply—" Judge Morrison held up his hand. "I'm going to allow it. This young man's future is at stake, and if he has something to say, I want to hear it. But son," he looked directly at Tyler, "this isn't a game. Whatever you're about to present needs to be relevant and truthful. Understand?" "Yes, sir. I understand." Tyler picked up his notebook and walked to the center of the courtroom. His legs felt like they might give out, but he forced himself to stand straight. He could feel every eye on him. His mom's hopeful gaze, Mr. Chen's angry glare, the curious stares of everyone else. He opened the notebook to the first page. "I want to start by saying I didn't vandalize that dealership. But I understand why people think I did. The evidence looks really bad for me. My fingerprints were there. Someone saw a person in a jacket that matches my school colors. I get it, he paused, taking a breath. But here's what doesn't make sense. They say I was wearing a Letterman jacket. Red and black, right? From Lincoln High School. Tyler looked at the judge. I quit the basketball team 2 years ago, right after my dad died. I never got a Letterman jacket because you only get those after you complete 2 full seasons. I quit halfway through my 2nd year. I don't own one. I've never owned one. Someone in the gallery gasped softly. Tyler pressed on. When the police told me about the jacket, I knew something was wrong. So I started looking into things myself. I'm in the coding club at school. I also do photography for the yearbook. Those things taught me how to notice details, how to track information. He pulled out the first photo from his notebook. This is Mr. Torres, the witness who said he saw me running from the scene. Tyler held it up so everyone could see. It showed Torres sitting at a coffee shop with another man. This was taken 3 days before the vandalism happened. I found out who Torres was from the court papers my mom got, so I followed him for a few days. Ms. Rodriguez stood up. Your Honor, this is stalking. I was being careful and legal, Tyler said firmly. I stayed in public places. I didn't approach him. I just watched and took photos. Because I needed to know who this guy was and why he was lying about me. Judge Morrison motioned for him to continue. The man sitting with Torres is Richard Stallworth. He's Mr. Chen's business partner. They co-own the dealership. Why would the witness who supposedly just happened to drive by randomly that night be having coffee with the victim's business partner 3 days before the crime? The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Order, continue, young man. Tyler felt a surge of confidence. They were listening. Really listening. It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. He pulled out more papers. I've been to that dealership before. Not to vandalize it, but for a school project. I'm taking an automotive design class, and we had to photograph classic cars and write about their history. The teacher can confirm this. I went there 4 times over 2 months, always during business hours, always with permission. He showed receipts and permission forms. That's how my fingerprints got on the window and on that brick. The brick was part of the decorative border around the display. I touched it while trying to get a better angle for photos. There are other customers in some of my pictures who probably have their fingerprints there too. Nobody checked them. Mr. Patterson was now standing, looking at Tyler with something like amazement. Even he hadn't known about all of this, Tyler continued. But the most important thing I found was this. He pulled out a printed screenshot. This is from the convenience store across the street from the dealership. I went there and talked to the owner, Mr. Kim. I explained what happened to me, and he let me look at his security footage from that night. The image showed a timestamp, February 14th, 10:47 p.m., a figure entering the dealership. This is Torres, going into the building 20 minutes before the vandalism supposedly happened. Why would a random witness be inside the place that's about to get vandalized? Another photo. This is from the same camera at 11:23 p.m. Someone leaving the dealership, wearing a red and black jacket. Tyler paused for effect, but looked closer. This person is shorter than me, heavier. The jacket has something written on the back. When I zoomed in and enhanced it on my computer, you can see part of a name. It says Rick S. He pulled out his phone, which Mr. Patterson helped him connect to the courtroom's display screen. Richard Stallworth, Rick. He went to Lincoln High 30 years ago. Same school, same colors. And look at this. Tyler pulled up social media photos. This is from Stallworth's Facebook page posted 4 months ago at a school reunion. He's wearing his old Letterman jacket, red and black. With his name on the back, the courtroom exploded. People were talking over each other. Mr. Chen's face had gone pale. His lawyer was frantically whispering to him. Ms. Rodriguez looked like she'd been slapped. Judge Morrison banged his gavel hard. Order, I will have order. When things quieted down, Tyler wasn't done. His hands weren't shaking anymore. I looked into the dealership's finances too. It's all public record. Anyone can look it up at the county clerk's office. Mr. Chen's business is in serious trouble. They owe over $300,000 to different creditors, but 6 weeks before the vandalism, they increased their insurance coverage to $500,000. He let that sink in. You don't increase insurance by that much unless you're expecting something bad to happen, or unless you're planning to make something bad happen. Tyler turned to face Mr. Chen directly. You needed money. Your business was failing, So you and Mr. Stallworth came up with a plan. Vandalize your own place, collect the insurance money, and blame it on someone else. Someone young, someone who'd been there before and wouldn't have a perfect alibi. Mr. Chen stood up, his face red. This is ridiculous. You have no proof of— Sit down, Mr. Chen, the judge said sharply. You'll have your chance to respond. Tyler pulled out bank statements. This is Torres's account information. I got this through a legal public records request because he has a lien against his house. 3 days after the vandalism, $15,000 appeared in his account. Cash deposit. I traced it back through the bank's routing information to an LLC connected to Mr. Stallworth. He looked at Torres, who had gone completely white. They paid you to lie. Maybe you needed the money badly. Maybe they threatened you. I don't know. But they paid you to say you saw me. Tyler turned back to the judge. I'm 17 years old. I'm not a criminal. I'm just a kid trying to finish high school and figure out what to do with my life. These men tried to destroy my future because it was convenient for them, because they thought nobody would believe me over a respected businessman and his witness. He closed his notebook. But I have evidence. Real evidence. And I think if you look into this properly, you'll find a lot more than what I could dig up on my own. The courtroom was completely silent. Tyler stood there, his notebook clutched to his chest, waiting. Judge Morrison removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, his expression was different. Thoughtful. Serious. Ms. Rodriguez, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about this case, and I want investigators to locate Mr. Stallworth immediately. Court will recess for 2 hours while we sort this out. As people began filing out, Tyler sat down. His whole body was trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Mr. Patterson put a hand on his shoulder. That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen in a courtroom. Maybe both. Tyler's mom pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around him. She was crying, but this time it sounded different, like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The 2-hour recess felt like the longest wait of Tyler's life. He sat in a small conference room with his mom and Mr. Patterson, but nobody could sit still. His mom kept pacing back and forth, wringing her hands. Mr. Patterson was on his phone, talking quietly with someone. Tyler just stared at his notebook, going over everything again and again, making sure he hadn't missed anything. Outside in the hallway, he could hear people talking. The news had spread fast. Someone had called a local reporter, and now there were camera crews setting up outside the courthouse. This was bigger than just his case now. This was about corruption, about powerful people thinking they could get away with anything. About an hour into the recess, there was a commotion outside. Tyler heard shouting, heavy footsteps. He peeked out of the conference room door and saw police officers escorting someone down the hallway in handcuffs. Richard Stallworth. The man looked furious and scared at the same time. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face red and sweating. I want my lawyer, Stallworth was yelling. This is illegal. You can't just arrest me without— We're not arresting you yet, Mr. Stallworth, one of the officers said calmly. But the judge wants to ask you some questions. I'd suggest you cooperate. They took him into another room down the hall. Tyler felt his heart pounding. This was really happening. His evidence had actually made them take action. Mr. Patterson came up behind him. They found him at the airport. He was trying to board a flight to Mexico, had a one-way ticket and $40,000 in cash in his carry-on bag. Tyler turned to look at his lawyer. That makes him look pretty guilty, doesn't it? Very guilty, Mr. Patterson agreed with a small smile. Whatever you found in that notebook of yours, it scared him enough to run. When court finally reconvened, the atmosphere was completely different. The gallery was even more packed now, with reporters filling the back rows. Judge Morrison looked serious, like he'd aged 5 years during the recess. Mr. Chen sat hunched over at his table, his confident lawyer now looking worried and conferring with him in urgent whispers. The judge cleared his throat. Before we continue, I want to inform everyone that new evidence has come to light during our recess. Investigators have been working quickly, and we've made some significant discoveries. He nodded to a detective standing near the door. Detective Barnes, a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, stepped forward. Your Honor, we executed a warrant for Mr. Stallworth's phone and financial records. We've found text messages between Mr. Stallworth and Mr. Chen discussing the insurance policy increase. We've also found communications about finding someone to take the fall. Their words, not mine. The courtroom erupted again. Tyler felt his chest tighten. They'd actually found proof. Real solid proof, Detective Barnes continued. We've also interviewed Mr. Torres again, this time with evidence of the $15,000 deposit. He's agreed to cooperate fully. He's admitted that Mr. Stallworth approached him at his workplace and offered him money to claim he witnessed the vandalism. Torres was behind on his mortgage and his daughter needed surgery. He made a terrible choice, but he's willing to testify to the truth now. Tyler looked over at Torres, who was sitting in the back of the courtroom. The man looked broken, his head in his hands. Part of Tyler felt sorry for him. Desperate people do desperate things, but Torres had almost destroyed his life. Judge Morrison turned to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you directly. Do you wish to testify at this time? Mr. Chen's lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically. Chen shook his head, then whispered back. The lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client wishes to exercise his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination at this time. I see, the judge said coldly. Mr. Stallworth, you're being brought in now. Officers led Stallworth into the courtroom. He'd been given a chair at a separate table away from Chen. He looked like he'd been crying. His expensive suit didn't seem so impressive anymore. Judge Morrison didn't waste time. Mr. Stallworth, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain yourself. You were found attempting to leave the country with a significant amount of cash, just hours after evidence emerged suggesting you were involved in insurance fraud and conspiracy. What do you have to say? Stallworth's lawyer, a young man who looked fresh out of law school, tried to object, but Stallworth waved him off. He stood up slowly, looking defeated. It was supposed to be simple, Stallworth said quietly. The business was dying. We'd poured everything into it. Our savings, our homes, everything. The insurance money was the only way out. Mr. Chen hissed at him to stop talking, but Stallworth kept going. Robert noticed the kid taking pictures of the cars. He'd been there several times. We thought if we staged it right, made it look like some angry teenager did it, nobody would question it. Kids vandalize stuff all the time, right? He laughed bitterly. We checked his school records. He'd had some discipline problems. Nothing serious, but enough to make him look like a troublemaker. Tyler felt sick listening to how casually they'd decided to ruin his life. Stallworth continued. I wore my old Letterman jacket, same colors as his school. Robert wiped the kid's fingerprints from the window where he'd been taking pictures and transferred them to a brick we left at the scene. We paid Torres to say he saw someone running away. It all lined up perfectly. Except it didn't, Judge Morrison said sternly, because this young man refused to accept being framed. He investigated. He found evidence. He did the work that should have been done by investigators in the first place. The judge looked at Tyler. Young man, stand up, please. Tyler stood on shaky legs. What you did was remarkable, and while I don't generally encourage civilians to conduct their own investigations, your thorough documentation and critical thinking have exposed a serious injustice. You've also revealed significant gaps in how this case was initially handled. He turned to the prosecutor. Ms. Rodriguez, I want a full review of the initial investigation. How were Mr. Torres's connections to the victims not discovered? How was the convenience store footage not obtained? These are basic investigative steps that were overlooked. Ms. Rodriguez looked embarrassed. Yes, Your Honor. We'll conduct a thorough review. Judge Morrison picked up his gavel. Based on the evidence presented by the defendant and confirmed by investigators, I'm dismissing all charges against Tyler Henderson immediately. Furthermore, I'm ordering the arrest of Robert Chen and Richard Stallworth on charges of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and tampering with evidence. The gavel came down hard. The courtroom exploded with noise. People were standing, talking, some even applauding. Tyler felt his knees go weak, and Mr. Patterson had to catch his arm to steady him. His mom was crying again, but now she was smiling through the tears. Officers moved to formally arrest Mr. Chen, who sat frozen at his table. Stallworth was already in handcuffs. Both men would be taken to jail, where they'd wait for their own trial. Tyler watched them being led away. A part of him felt victorious, but another part just felt tired. These men had been willing to destroy him to save themselves. That was a hard thing to understand. Judge Morrison called Tyler up to the bench. Up close, the judge looked kind, grandfatherly. Son, what you did took courage and intelligence. Those are qualities that will serve you well in life. I hope you consider a career in law or investigation. We need people who care about the truth as much as you clearly do. "Thank you, sir," Tyler managed to say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. As he walked out of the courtroom with his mom and Mr. Patterson, reporters swarmed them. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in his face. "Tyler, how does it feel to be cleared? Did you always know you could prove your innocence? What made you decide to investigate on your own?" Mr. Patterson guided them through the crowd, not letting Tyler answer. "My client will make a statement later. Right now he needs time with his family." They made it to Mr. Patterson's car and Tyler collapsed into the back seat. His mom sat next to him holding his hand. They didn't say anything for a long time. They didn't need to. As they drove away from the courthouse, Tyler looked back at the building. Just that morning, he'd walked in thinking his life was over. Now he was driving away a free person, innocent, vindicated, but more than that, he'd learned something important. The truth mattered. Evidence mattered. And sometimes, when nobody else will fight for you, you have to fight for yourself. His phone buzzed with texts. Friends from school who'd heard the news. Teachers offering congratulations. Even people he barely knew were reaching out, but Tyler turned his phone off. Right now, he just wanted to sit with his mom in the quiet car and let the weight of the last 3 weeks finally lift off his shoulders. Tomorrow, he could think about what came next. Tonight, he was just going to be grateful that justice, even though it took some work, had finally won. 3 weeks after the trial, Tyler sat in his bedroom surrounded by envelopes. Big ones, official-looking ones, with university logos in the corners. His mom kept bringing them up from the mailbox with this look on her face, somewhere between pride and disbelief. "Another one," she'd say, placing it on his desk. "That makes 11. 11 universities. 11 scholarship offers, some partial, some full rides, all because word had spread about what happened in that courtroom." The story had gone viral online. "Teen detective exposes corruption," read one headline. "High school student outsmarts criminals," said another. Tyler wasn't sure how he felt about all the attention. Part of him was proud, sure, but another part just wanted everything to go back to normal, except normal didn't exist anymore. He'd been changed by what happened in ways he was still figuring out. His phone rang. Unknown number. He'd been getting a lot of those lately, reporters mostly, so he almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. "Is this Tyler Henderson?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes, ma'am." "This is Dean Patricia Walsh from State University School of Criminal Justice. I wanted to call you personally. We've been following your case, and I have to say what you did was extraordinary." Tyler felt his face flush. "Thank you. I just did what I had to do." "That's exactly the kind of attitude we look for in our students, Tyler. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our criminology program. Room, board, tuition, everything. We also have an honors track that I think you'd be perfect for." He sat down on his bed, phone pressed to his ear. A full scholarship. To study criminology. A few weeks ago, he'd been worried about even graduating high school without a criminal record. Now someone was offering him a future. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Say you'll think about it. We're sending the official offer in the mail, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. What you did, Tyler, that's what real investigative work looks like. You didn't give up when everyone told you the case was closed. You followed the evidence. That's what we teach here, but you already understand it in your bones." After the call ended, Tyler sat there for a long time just staring at the wall. His dad's photo sat on his dresser, the one from before he got sick. He wondered what his dad would think about all this. Probably something like, "I'm proud of you, kid, but don't let it go to your head." Good advice. The next day at school was weird. It had been weird ever since he came back, actually. Kids he barely knew wanted to sit with him at lunch. Teachers looked at him differently. Coach Stevens, the one who'd reported him for talking back that time, had actually apologized in front of the whole class. But there was one thing Tyler wanted to do before the day ended. He found Mr. Kim, his coding club advisor, after school in the computer lab. "Tyler," Mr. Kim looked up from his laptop smiling. "How are you holding up with all this attention?" "It's a lot," Tyler admitted. "But that's actually why I'm here. I've been thinking about the coding club, how small it is, how maybe other kids don't know how useful these skills can be." Mr. Kim leaned back in his chair, interested. "Go on. What if we expanded it? Taught more people basic stuff like how to verify information online, how to spot fake photos, how to trace things back to their sources, not just coding, but digital literacy, investigation skills." "You mean like what you did for your case?" "Exactly. I got lucky that I already knew some of this stuff from coding and photography. But what about kids who don't? They could be in trouble someday and not know how to help themselves. Mr. Kim nodded slowly. That's a really good idea. Actually, the principal was asking me about doing something special with the coding club after what happened with you. This could be perfect. You'd help teach? Yeah, Tyler said. I mean, if people would want to learn from me. Are you kidding? You're like a legend around here now. We'd have to turn people away. The club's first expanded meeting was the following Tuesday. Tyler expected maybe a few extra people. Instead, 37 students showed up. They packed into the computer lab, sitting on desks and the floor when the chairs ran out. Tyler stood at the front of the room, suddenly nervous. He'd defended himself in front of a judge in a packed courtroom, but somehow this felt scarier. Hey everyone, he started. So, thanks for coming. I guess you all heard about what happened to me. A few people laughed nervously. Others nodded. The thing is, I almost didn't fight it. When they arrested me when everyone believed I was guilty, part of me wanted to just accept it, because fighting back seemed impossible. I'm just a kid, right? What could I do against adults who had money and power and witnesses? He pulled up his notebook, the same one from the trial. But then I realized something. The truth doesn't care how old you are or how much money you have. The truth is just the truth. And if you're willing to work hard enough, document everything, and not give up, you can find it. Tyler spent the next hour walking them through his investigation. How he'd tracked Torres, how he'd gotten the security footage from Mr. Kim's convenience store, how he'd used public records to find the financial information, how he'd connected all the pieces together. The most important thing, he said, is that none of this was illegal. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break any laws. I just used information that was already available to anyone who knew where to look and what questions to ask. That's what I want to teach you guys. How to think critically, how to verify things, how to protect yourselves. A girl in the front row raised her hand. Jenny, from his English class. Were you scared? When you stood up in court like that? Tyler thought about it. Terrified. But I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't try. Being afraid is okay. Letting fear stop you from fighting for yourself. That's the problem. The club grew every week. By the end of the month, they had over 50 members. Mr. Kim had to request a bigger room. Tyler taught them about metadata in photos, about how to spot edited images, about understanding bias in sources. Other students started bringing their own skills to share. Jessica, a senior, taught everyone about social media privacy. David, who wanted to be a journalist, showed them how to fact-check articles. It felt good. Better than good. Tyler had been given a second chance, and now he was using it to help other people. Meanwhile, Robert Chen and Richard Stallworth's trial date was set. The prosecutor, Ms. Rodriguez, actually reached out to Tyler personally. She apologized for not investigating more thoroughly the first time. She asked if he'd be willing to testify about his investigation. Of course, Tyler said. Whatever helps. You know, Ms. Rodriguez told him over the phone, you did my job better than I did. That's embarrassing for me, but it's also inspiring. You should consider law school someday. Everyone kept saying that. Consider law school. Consider criminology. Consider investigation work. Tyler was starting to think maybe they were right. Maybe this wasn't just a weird thing that happened to him. Maybe it was showing him what he was supposed to do with his life. His mom's cleaning business was doing better too. After the story went viral, people in town felt bad about how they'd treated them. They started hiring her again, recommending her to friends. She'd even hired 2 part-time helpers and bought a used van to replace the car she'd sold. Things are looking up, she said one night over dinner. Your dad would be so proud of you, baby. Tyler smiled. I hope so. I know so. You showed everyone what kind of person you are. Strong, smart, fair. That's all him. All the best parts of him are in you. Later that night, Tyler got a message from an unexpected source. David Torres, the man who'd lied about seeing him at the scene. The message was simple. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I'm testifying against them at their trial. It won't undo the damage, but maybe it'll help. You're a good kid. Thank you for not giving up. Tyler stared at the message for a long time. He thought about everything Torres's lie had cost him. The fear, the shame, the way people had looked at him. But he also thought about what Dean Walsh had said. About following the evidence. About being fair. Torres had made a terrible choice, but he was making it right now. That had to count for something. Tyler typed back, "I appreciate the apology. What you did hurt, but I understand you were in a bad spot. Good luck with everything." It wasn't total forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And Tyler was learning that justice wasn't just about punishment. Sometimes it was about giving people a chance to make things right. He closed his laptop and looked at all the scholarship letters on his desk. State Universities was on top. He picked it up and read it again. Criminology, honors program, a chance to turn everything that happened into something positive. Tyler opened his drawer and pulled out an acceptance form. He started filling it out, his hand steady. His future suddenly bright with possibilities he'd never imagined just a month ago. 4 months later, Tyler stood outside the same courthouse where his life had almost ended. But this time the summer sun was warm on his face, and he wore a visitor badge instead of sitting at the defendant's table. Today was the final day of Chen and Stallworth's trial, and Tyler had been called to testify. The months since his own case had been a whirlwind. He'd accepted the scholarship to State University. His coding club had grown so large they'd split it into 2 sessions. Local news had done 3 follow-up stories about him. A podcast about wrongful accusations had interviewed him for 2 hours. Through it all, Tyler had tried to stay grounded, to remember that he was still just a kid who'd gotten lucky and worked hard. Inside the courtroom, everything felt different from last time. Now he sat in the gallery with his mom, watching as the prosecution laid out their case against the 2 men who'd tried to destroy his future. Ms. Rodriguez was thorough, presenting text messages, financial records, and testimony from multiple witnesses. David Torres had testified earlier in the week. Tyler had watched from the gallery as the man broke down on the stand, explaining how Stallworth had approached him at his job at the warehouse, how desperate he'd been with his daughter's medical bills, how he'd convinced himself that lying wouldn't really hurt anyone because surely they'd find the real vandal eventually. "I was wrong," Torres had said, his voice cracking. "I almost ruined an innocent kid's life for money. I'll regret that until the day I die." The defense lawyers had tried their best, but the evidence was overwhelming. Tyler's investigation had given prosecutors everything they needed, and their own investigation had filled in the gaps. Text messages between Chen and Stallworth discussing the insurance solution, bank transfers, the increased insurance policy, Stallworth's attempt to flee the country. It all painted a clear picture of 2 desperate men who'd chosen crime over bankruptcy. When it was Tyler's turn to testify, he walked to the stand with steady steps. He'd been nervous the first time he'd addressed this courtroom, but now he knew what he was doing. He knew his evidence was solid. The prosecutor asked him to walk through his investigation again. Tyler did, explaining each step clearly and simply, how he'd noticed the inconsistency about the Letterman jacket, how he'd followed Torres, how he'd obtained the security footage, how he'd researched the financial records. Chen's lawyer tried to discredit him during cross-examination. "Isn't it true that you were facing serious charges when you conducted this investigation? That you were desperate to find anyone else to blame?" "I was facing charges, yes," Tyler said calmly. "But I wasn't looking for someone else to blame. I was looking for the truth. The truth happened to be that your client and his partner framed me. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted innocent interactions as evidence of conspiracy?" Tyler shook his head. Text messages saying, "We need someone to take the fall," aren't really open to interpretation. Neither is your client increasing his insurance right before a convenient vandalism. Neither is his partner trying to flee the country with cash. The lawyer backed off after that. There wasn't much else he could say. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, everyone in the courtroom held their breath. On the charge of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of filing false police reports? Guilty. On the charge of tampering with evidence? Guilty, all guilty. On every count, both men. Chen sat with his head in his hands. Stallworth stared straight ahead, his face blank. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. When that day came, Tyler attended again. He wanted to see it through to the end. Chen received 3 years in prison and was ordered to pay restitution to the insurance company and to Tyler's family for their legal expenses. Stallworth got 4 years because of his direct role in the vandalism and his attempt to flee. Both men would lose their business, their reputations, everything they'd tried so hard to save through their scheme. Before the judge dismissed them, He had some final words. Mr. Chen, Mr. Stallworth, you destroyed your own lives trying to avoid financial hardship through illegal means. But worse than that, you tried to destroy a young man's life to cover your crimes. You picked him because you thought he was vulnerable. A teenager with some minor discipline problems and no resources to fight back. You were wrong about him, and I hope you spend your time in prison thinking about that. Outside the courthouse afterward, reporters surrounded Tyler again. This time he was ready for them. Mr. Patterson had helped him prepare a statement. I'm grateful that justice was served, Tyler said into the microphones. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. I was lucky. I had skills that helped me investigate, and I had people who believed in me eventually. But a lot of people in my situation wouldn't have those advantages. That's why I'm committed to teaching others how to protect themselves, how to think critically, and how to not give up even when things look impossible. A reporter called out, "What's next for you, Tyler?" College in the fall. I'm studying criminology at State University. I want to work in a field where I can help people who are in situations like I was, maybe as a defense investigator, or in criminal justice reform. I haven't decided exactly, but I know I want to make sure the truth matters. As the cameras clicked and reporters scribbled notes, Tyler thought about how far he'd come. 4 months ago, he'd been sitting in a courtroom convinced his life was over. Now he was standing in front of that same courthouse talking about his future plans. The following week, Tyler gave a presentation at a youth justice conference. The room was packed with lawyers, teenagers from programs for at-risk youth, and community advocates. Standing at the podium, looking out at all those faces, Tyler felt a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. The system isn't perfect, he told them. I almost got lost in it. But the truth is powerful if you're willing to fight for it. Age doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. What matters is evidence, persistence, and refusing to accept injustice. He talked about his case, but more importantly, he talked about what everyone in that room could do. Question assumptions. Verify information. Document everything. Stand up for what's right even when it's scary. I was terrified when I raised my hand in that courtroom, Tyler admitted. I thought everyone would laugh at me or ignore me, but I did it anyway because staying silent was more terrifying. Letting innocent people suffer because we're afraid to speak up. That's the real tragedy. The applause when he finished was thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. An older woman, a public defender who looked exhausted, came up to him afterward. I've been doing this work for 20 years, she said. I've seen so many kids give up because they didn't think anyone would believe them. What you did reminded me why I started this job. Thank you. That summer before college, Tyler kept teaching at the coding club. It had become something bigger than he'd imagined. The school board approved it as an official class for the next year. Mr. Kim would teach it during school hours, and Tyler had recorded video lessons that students could access online. Other schools in the district asked if they could use the curriculum. Then schools in other states. Tyler found himself consulting with education departments about digital literacy and critical thinking skills for teenagers. His mom couldn't believe it. My baby's making a real difference, she'd say, shaking her head with pride. On Tyler's last day before leaving for college, he visited Mr. Kim's convenience store, the man who'd let him access the security footage that had saved his case. Just wanted to say thank you again, Tyler said. You believed me when you had no reason to. Mr. Kim smiled. I believed in you because I saw something in your eyes that day. Determination, truth. You reminded me of my own son. He's about your age. I hope if he's ever in trouble, someone will help him the way I tried to help you. Tyler left the store and walked through his neighborhood, past the courthouse, past Chen's old dealership, now boarded up and for sale, past his high school where so much had changed in just a few months. He thought about his dad, about the lessons on integrity and standing up for what's right. Those lessons had saved him. More than the coding skills or the photography knowledge, it was the belief that truth mattered that had carried him through. His phone buzzed. A text from Dean Walsh at State University. Looking forward to having you here in a few weeks. Your dorm assignment is ready. Welcome to your future. Tyler smiled and typed back a thank you. Then he headed home where his mom was making his favorite dinner to celebrate. Tomorrow they'd start packing for college. Tomorrow the next chapter would begin. But tonight Tyler just wanted to enjoy being 17, being free and being surrounded by people who loved him. The case was closed. The guilty were punished. Justice had been served. More than that, Tyler had discovered who he was and who he wanted to become. Someone who fought for truth, someone who helped others, someone who never gave up no matter how impossible things seemed. As he walked up to his front door, he could smell his mom's cooking and hear music playing inside. Normal things. Beautiful things. Things he'd almost lost. Tyler had learned that justice wasn't just about courtrooms and verdicts. It was about every person having the courage to stand up and say, "This isn't right," when they see something wrong. It was about using whatever skills you have to make things better. It was about refusing to let the powerful crush the powerless just because they think they can. He opened the door and stepped inside, ready for dinner, ready for tomorrow, ready for whatever came next. Because Tyler Henderson, the kid who'd almost been destroyed by false accusations, had proven something important to himself and to everyone watching. The truth always matters. Always. And if you fight hard enough for it, the truth will set you free, and sometimes, if you're really lucky, it'll show you exactly who you're meant to be.